Do you know what it feels like to wake up one morning and realize that everything you've been told since childhood might be a lie? I do.
The testimonies featured on this channel are presented as received, reflecting the personal experience and perspectives of the individuals who have generously shared them with us. We encourage our viewers to approach these testimonies with compassion and understanding, as these are personal testimonies of people involved. We also encourage you to always refer to the Holy Bible and the teachings of Jesus Christ and his apostles for guidance. You can consider subscribing to the channel to support our ministry. There are some stories that don't just shock you, they shake the very ground you stand on. This is not just a testimony. It's the voice of a young woman whose entire life was turned upside down because she dared to search for truth. Imagine being raised to believe something with all your heart, only to find out that the very foundation of your belief hides a truth so disturbing, so life-changing, that it threatens everything you have ever known. This is the story of Hanan, a 28-year-old Muslim woman whose journey into the depths of the Quran led her to a revelation that would cost her her family, her safety, and almost her life. A revelation that made her the target of those she loved most, a revelation that chained her, starved her, and locked her away for 5 long weeks in a place she never thought she would be. But before she was locked away, she was searching. She was asking questions, dangerous questions. And when the answers came, they didn't come gently. They came like a blade cutting through everything she believed in. What was this truth that could turn a devoted Muslim into a hunted woman overnight? Why did her family, the people who once held her, turn into her captors? And how did she survive 5 weeks of fear, isolation, and the constant threat of death? This isn't just her testimony. It's a cry from the heart, a warning, and a hope. Before we begin, I encourage you to watch to the very end, because what Hanan discovered could be the most important truth you hear today. And as you watch, write in the comments which country you are watching from, because this story needs to be heard across the world. Let's hear from Hanan.
My name is Hanan. I was raised in a very strict Muslim home. Islam wasn't just our religion, it was our identity, our pride, our way of life. From the moment I could walk, I was taught to memorize verses of the Quran. My mother would wake me before sunrise to pray, and my father would proudly tell guests that his daughter could recite Surah Al-Fatiha at just 3 years old. But growing up, I had a secret. I had questions. And in Islam, questions can be dangerous. It began when I was 27. I was studying the Quran in preparation to teach at a local madrasa. My teacher assigned me Surah 355, where it says Allah will cause Isa, Jesus, to die, raise him to himself, and make him superior over those who disbelieve. I had read it before, but this time, something inside me stopped. Why would the Quran say Jesus would be raised to Allah himself? Why does it say he will be superior over all others, even over Muhammad? And why would the Quran call him a word from Allah and a spirit from him, Surah 4:171, when no other prophet is described this way? I told myself to stop thinking. But the questions followed me like shadows. One night, I decided to read without the tafsir. No commentaries, no scholars, just the Quran itself. That's when I found Surah 10:94, the verse where Allah tells Muhammad that if he is in doubt about what has been revealed, he should ask the people of the book, the Christians and the Jews, because the truth had already come to them. I froze. Why would Muhammad be told to ask Christians if our scripture was corrupted? If the Bible was false, why would Allah direct his prophet to it? I couldn't sleep that night. My heart was racing. I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff. The more I read, the more cracks appeared in my faith. Surah 19 said Jesus was born of a virgin. Surah 3 said he performed miracles. And in Surah 349, it even said he gave life to the dead and created birds from clay, things Muhammad never did. But the verse that shattered everything was Surah 4:157. It said they did not kill or crucify Jesus, but it was made to appear so. I had always been told this meant the crucifixion never happened. But the more I read about history, both in Islamic and non-Islamic sources, the more I realized there was no evidence for the claim. Even Islamic scholars disagreed on the meaning. So why would the Quran deny the crucifixion, the very thing Christians believe brought salvation? I didn't know it yet, but I was standing at the doorway of a truth that would change my life forever. I began secretly comparing the Quran with the Bible. Late at night, with my bedroom door locked, I would read the Gospel of John on my phone. When I read John 14 verse 6, where Jesus said, "I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me," I felt something I had never felt reading the Quran: peace. But peace quickly turned to fear. I told my cousin one evening that I was confused about some Quran verses. I thought maybe she would understand. But by the next morning, the whole family knew. That's when the persecution began. At first, it was just arguments, shouting, accusing me of being influenced by Christian lies. But when I refused to stop reading the Bible, my father's face changed. I will never forget his eyes that day. They looked at me not as his daughter, but as an enemy. One night, they came into my room. My uncle grabbed my phone and smashed it. My mother was crying, my brothers were shouting, and my father said the words I will never forget. "If you leave Islam, you will leave this life. We will not have an apostate in this family." I thought they were just angry. But the next day, they locked me in the storage room at the back of the house. No windows. A single mattress on the floor. They said it was for my own protection. But the truth? It was my prison. The days became weeks. I lost track of time. Sometimes they would bring me food once a day, sometimes not at all. At night, I could hear my brothers outside the door, laughing, saying I should be thankful they hadn't killed me yet. I prayed, sometimes in whispers, sometimes in tears. I didn't know much about how Christians prayed, but I called out to Jesus every night. And every time I said his name, I felt hope flicker inside me like a candle in the darkness. But I knew they were planning something worse. I could hear the discussions. My uncle kept saying, "We must take her to the sheikh. He will know how to deal with her." Would they take me to be beaten? Killed? Forced into marriage? One night, I lay awake, my heart pounding. I thought, is this the end? And that, my friends, was only the beginning. Have you ever counted the hours in darkness, not knowing if you would live to see the next sunrise? For me, the days in that locked storage room blurred together. The only way I knew time was passing was by the sound of the call to prayer echoing faintly through the walls. 5 times a day, they would pray to the God I once prayed to, the God I now questioned, the God I could no longer see as truth. I had no Bible anymore, only the verses I had memorized in secret during those late-night readings. Over and over, I whispered John 14 verse 6, even though I didn't yet fully understand it. Sometimes I prayed Psalm 23 from memory, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, and I clung to those words like a drowning person clings to a piece of wood in the sea. But the fear was real. On the 10th day, I think it was the 10th, I could have been wrong, the door opened suddenly. My uncle came in with 2 of my cousins. They stood over me like judges over a criminal. "Are you ready to repent and return to Islam?" he asked. I stayed silent. His voice grew sharper. "Do you want to die? Because that is what will happen if you continue this path." I don't know where the courage came from, but I said, if following Jesus costs me my life, then so be it. The slap came so fast I didn't see his hand move. My cheek burned, my ears rang, but I didn't cry. That seemed to make them angrier. From then on, they changed their tactics. They didn't just want to break my body, they wanted to break my mind. They would come in and shout verses from the Quran, telling me how Christians are astray, cursed, and deceived. They said Jesus was just a man, that I was following a false god, that I was bringing shame to generations of our family. At night, they would leave the light on and play loud Quran recitations outside my door so I couldn't sleep. I remember one night, I pressed my hands over my ears, curled into a ball, and cried silently. I whispered, Jesus, if you are real, if you truly are who you say you are, please, get me out of here. Please don't let them destroy me. And then something happened. The next morning, I overheard my mother outside the door. She was arguing with my father. She said, we can't keep her here forever. People will start asking questions. My father said, then we will take her to the sheik. He will finish what we started. Finish what we started. Those words chilled my blood. I had heard stories about finishing apostates. Some never came back. Some were found dead and buried quietly, with no questions asked. I knew my time was running out. That night, I made a decision. I didn't know how, but I would escape. It wasn't courage, it was desperation. For 2 days, I observed everything. I noticed that when my youngest brother brought food, he sometimes forgot to lock the door immediately after opening it. I also noticed there was a small gap under the window frame, too small to climb out, but maybe big enough to call out for help if someone passed by. But who would help me? In my community, even the neighbors might return me to my family if they found out why I was locked away. Then, a strange thing happened. On what I believe was the 31st day, my mother entered alone. She didn't shout, she didn't slap me. She just stood there. Her eyes were red from crying. She said quietly, Hanan, you are my daughter. But if you continue with this Jesus, I will have no daughter. I can't save you from what your father and uncles will do. I wanted to run into her arms, but I couldn't. Because she wasn't really warning me to protect me, she was telling me to give up. Come back, she said. Just say the Shahida again, and all this will be over. For a moment, I thought about it. If I pretended, I could be free. I could breathe fresh air again. But in my heart, I knew that denying Jesus, even with my lips, would be betraying the one who had given me hope in this darkness. So I said, I can't. She closed her eyes and walked away without another word. 2 nights later, the opportunity came. My youngest brother came in with food. He was distracted, arguing with someone on his phone. He placed the tray down and walked out without locking the door. My heart pounded so hard I thought it would explode. I waited a minute, then another. Then I crept to the door and pushed it open. The house was silent. Everyone was asleep. I moved as quietly as I could, my bare feet barely touching the floor. My hands were trembling. I reached the front door, but the main lock was bolted from the inside. I froze. What if someone woke up? Then, I remembered the back door in the kitchen. I ran to it, praying under my breath, Jesus, please, please. The back door was locked too, but with an old, rusty latch. I pulled with all my strength. It creaked loudly, and I froze, listening for footsteps. None came. I pulled again, and it gave way. The cold night air hit my face like a splash of water. I ran. I didn't know where I was going, but I ran. Through narrow alleys, over piles of trash, past sleeping dogs that barked as I passed. I didn't stop until my legs gave out. I collapsed in front of a small shop. The owner, an old man, came out with a flashlight. He looked at me, my torn clothes, my bruised face, and asked what happened. I didn't tell him the whole truth. I just said I needed a place to hide. To my shock, he let me sleep in the shop's storeroom that night. I didn't know it yet, but that man's shop would become the place where God would begin the next chapter of my life. That night in the old man's shop was the first time in weeks I had slept without fear of someone unlocking the door to drag me away. When morning came, the shopkeeper, his name was Kareem, brought me bread and tea. He didn't ask too many questions, but I could tell he was suspicious. I thought he might send me back, until he asked one simple question. Are you running from your family, or from your religion? The way he said it made my heart stop. I hesitated, then whispered, both. He looked at me for a long moment. Then he said something I'll never forget. I know a place where people like you can be safe, but if I take you there, there's no turning back. I didn't know if it was a trap. I had heard of Muslims pretending to help apostates, only to lure them back for punishment. But what choice did I have? Staying meant being found. That night, he led me through winding streets until we reached a small house with no sign on the door. He knocked 3 times in a strange pattern, and a woman opened the door. Inside, I saw something I never thought I would see in my city. A group of people, men and women, sitting together with open Bibles. They were whispering prayers in a language I didn't recognize at first, and then I realized it was Arabic, but with words I had never heard in a mosque. Words about grace, about forgiveness, about love. The woman, whose name was Miriam, gave me a blanket and food. Then she said, "You are safe here. We are followers of Isa al-Masih, Jesus the Messiah." I couldn't hold back my tears. For the first time, I was surrounded by people who weren't afraid to say his name. Over the next days, they taught me what it really meant to follow Jesus. They explained that he wasn't just a prophet, he was God in human form. That his death on the cross was not a tragedy to be denied, but the very sacrifice that gave us life. That his resurrection wasn't just a story, it was proof of victory over death. I told them about the verses in the Quran that had made me doubt, Surah 355, Surah 10 hours 94 minutes, and others, and how they had led me to read the Bible. Miriam smiled and said, "Hanan, the truth was calling you even before you knew his name." One night, we read Matthew 10 verse 32, "Whoever acknowledges me before others, I will also acknowledge before my Father in heaven." My heart was pounding. I knew I had already chosen him in secret, but now, I wanted to declare it. That night, in a whisper so as not to alert the neighbors, I prayed out loud, "Jesus, I believe you are Lord. I give you my life." It felt like chains were falling off my soul. But peace didn't mean safety. Word began to spread that I had escaped. My uncle's men were asking around, visiting shops, offering money for information. One evening, Kareem came to the house, pale and shaking. He said, "They know you're alive. They know you're here in the city. We had to move again." For weeks, I stayed in safe houses, each one smaller and more hidden than the last. Sometimes we had to leave in the middle of the night. Once, we heard footsteps outside and had to hide in a basement for hours. Every time I thought about my family, my chest ached. I missed my mother's voice, even though she had walked away from me. I missed the comfort of my old life, even though it had been built on lies. But every time the fear threatened to crush me, I remembered Jesus' words, "In this world you will have trouble. But take heart. I have overcome the world." And then came the moment I never thought I'd have the courage for. A local underground Christian network invited me to share my testimony on video. They said it would be dangerous, my face would be seen, my voice heard. My family would know for sure I had not only left Islam, but publicly embraced Jesus. I prayed for days. Then I thought about the girl I had been before, the girl afraid to question, afraid to read, afraid to live in the light. And I knew I couldn't go back to silence. So I said yes. We filmed in a small room with just a camera and one light. I told my story, everything you've heard so far. I told them about the verses that opened my eyes, the weeks of imprisonment, the escape, and the moment I chose to follow Jesus. I spoke directly to the camera, my voice shaking but strong. If you are watching this and you feel trapped, know this, there is freedom in Jesus. He is worth the cost. Even if they take your family, your home, your life, He is worth it. When the video was shared, the threats began almost instantly. Messages saying I would be killed. Pictures of knives. My old friends calling me a traitor. And yet, something else happened. A young woman messaged me secretly. She said, "I am Muslim, but I have the same questions you had. Can you tell me more about Jesus?" I realized then, this is why I am still alive. Not to hide. Not to stay safe. But to shine the light I found in the darkness. So to everyone watching right now, maybe you are curious, maybe you are doubting, maybe you are afraid, listen to me, there is a truth deeper than fear, stronger than tradition, more powerful than death itself. That truth is Jesus Christ. He found me in my prison. He opened my heart in the middle of darkness. And He can do the same for you. I don't know what tomorrow holds for me. I still live with danger. But I know who holds my tomorrow. And that is enough. If my story has touched you, please write in the comments the country you are watching from. I want to see how far this message of hope can go. And remember, no matter where you are, no matter what chains hold you, Jesus can set you free.